Independence Day in the rearview mirror. Could we expect an active weather pattern that could result in some severe weather out east and drought-like conditions out west? And I'm also going to take a look at the ongoing flooding situation up by Vermont. All that coming up in this video. Howdy y'all, welcome back. Hope each and every one of y'all enjoyed your Independence Day. We're going to start looking at the severe weather threats for the next 3 days. It looks like the Storm Prediction Center has issued a slight risk, which spans from eastern Montana on down into Iowa and parts of Missouri. All hazards are possible today with a low end chance for tornadoes, which spans from Montana on down into Missouri, with just a 2% chance. And as far as damaging wind threat goes, there's a 15% chance here in the yellow. As far as large hail threat goes, that's the biggest threat of the three, as there is a 15% hatch area, which spans from Montana on down into Nebraska. As we head off into Hump Day, there's another slight risk, which includes Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, and parts of western Indiana is included in that, as well as there's a marginal risk here in the dark green. Now, all hazards are possible again tomorrow, as there is a low chance for tornadoes, which spans from Nebraska on into Indiana. As far as damaging wind threat goes, it's the biggest threat of the three, as it's a 50% hatch area, which includes parts of Illinois on over into Nebraska. The regular 50% surrounding that, and a 5% surrounding that here in the red. As far as large hail threat goes, there's a 50% which includes parts of Missouri on up into Nebraska with a 5% chance surrounding that in the red. And as we head off into Thursday, there's a big marginal risk area, which includes states from Wyoming on up into Vermont and New Hampshire here in the dark green. So now that we know the risks for the next 3 days, let's go ahead and take a look at the time frame when you could expect the worst and the severe weather. Let's go ahead and take a look at the HRR model. The date and time is up here if you want to keep track of that. It's an Eastern time as well. As we push forward, it looks like we could be dealing with some non-severe thunderstorms in the early afternoon hours today. Before that starts to clear out, destabilizes the atmosphere, and then that's going to lead the way to some renegade supercells by right around 6 o'clock over here in eastern Wyoming, and that's going to last all the way through right around 8 o'clock, where it starts to die down by right around midnight, and it's going to bring some flooding down here by Iowa, where there is a slight risk for excessive rainfall. So if you live in a low-lying area, please be aware of that. Turn around and do not drown. Now, I think the worst of severe weather today is going to occur from right around 6 o'clock through right around 9 o'clock. And as you can see, by around 8 o'clock over here in Rapid City, we're going to be dealing with some pretty big hailers out there. So make sure you put anything up you do not want damaged. And there's also a pretty big damaging wind threat today, as we could be dealing with 20 to 40 knot winds. It's right around 20 mile an hour. As we take a look at the tornado threat, there is a pretty low end chance for tornadoes today, but a chance nonetheless. And as we take a look at the significant tornadic parameters, and if you are new here, the significant tornadic parameters are basically a model that puts all the tornadic ingredients, puts it all into one run of where you could possibly see a tornado. Now that don't mean a tornado will form within this whole area. It just means that conditions are favorable for it. As you can see, we're going to be dealing with a 0.5 out of 10, not very high at all over here. We have seen higher chances over here in east of Rapid City. We could be dealing with almost a 1.1 out of 10. As we take a look at the composite reflectivity real quick, we could have some supercells interacting with that favorable environment. As we take a look at a sounding, this will show us what kind of ingredients we could be dealing with, as well as some failure mode. As we can see that the thermodynamics over here, we can see we're dealing with some low 80-degree temperatures with some mid 60-degree dew points out there. As far as the CAPE goes at the surface, we'll be dealing with 3,000 joules per kilogram. Basically, CAPE is just thunderstorm fuel. And as we can see, we have a little bit of a capping inversion, so it looks like tornadic filament could be suppressed today. So there's one failure mode. And another failure mode is going to be the kinematics, as we're going to be dealing with some pretty low kinematics out there, basically wind shear. But regardless if it's a low tornadic risk or a high tornadic risk, you still should be prepared. And never fear, a shelter is near. Seek shelter in a basement, some shelter, interior room, closet. Make sure you have the batteries fresh and the weather radios and the phones charged up, and have a way to get a warning. And again, if you live within the slight risk zones today, I would expect the worst severe that happen from around 6 o'clock through around 8, 9 o'clock. Just, again, keep that in mind if you live within the northern slight risk zones. And that leads us off into Hump Day, where we're going to lower resolution down to the NAM 3-kilometer model and push down over here into the Midwest region. And as we push this forward, it looks like we could possibly be dealing with a potential derecho event that lasts from 11 o'clock through right around 5 o'clock, which spans from Nebraska all the way down into Missouri. Now basically what a derecho is, I'll put a definition over here so y'all can read it. But basically what a derecho is basically a long-lived damaging wind event that lasts over a certain amount of miles. And it looks like we could possibly be dealing with some embedded tornadoes with that as well. We'll have a little 2% chance for tornadoes. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if there'd be an enhanced risk zone issued tomorrow due to this potential derecho event. And I think that the tornado chance could occur at 1 o'clock tomorrow. As you can see, we're going to be dealing with a 1 out of 10 on the tornadic scale over here. And as we can see, we have this derecho event's going to be interacting with that favorable environment. And if we take a look at the sounding, this will show us what kind of failure modes could be in place. And as we can see, our instability and moisture, we're going to be dealing with 90-degree temperatures with some upper 70-degree dew points. Definitely a moist, unstable environment we're going to be dealing with tomorrow. As we're going to be dealing with 5,000 joules per kilogram as far as Cape goes. Not much in the way of a capping inversion. Got a little dry slot out there, so make sure you don't get those nice cars out. A lot of wind shear out there as well, so don't look like much in the way of any failure modes tomorrow. Looks like tomorrow could be a bigger day than today as far as tornadoes go. And again, regardless of where tornado risk you are under, remain weather aware, know where to go when that tornado warning does go through. Make sure you keep fresh batteries in the weather radios and have a way to get a warning. So now that we know that we're going to be dealing with a derecho tomorrow, that's going to bring damaging winds and some potential tornadoes. There's also going to be a big flooding threat as there is a slight risk for excessive rainfall, so please be aware of that. Turn around and do not drown. That leads us off into Thursday. There's just a marginal risk. It's a pretty big area. It spans from Colorado on up into Vermont and New Hampshire, so it looks like a lot more rainfall is going to be occurring over here in the parts of the Northeast. So let's go ahead and take a look at how much more rainfall we could expect. And as we take a look at the simulated precipitation totals for next 168 hours, looks like we could expect an additional 2 inches of rainfall over here. So definitely, y'all have been getting slammed by flash flooding. It's almost like the Hazard, Kentucky event from last year, as y'all have gotten a flash flood emergency and you've been dealing with a lot of heavy rainfall. Looks like we could be dealing with a marginal risk for excessive rainfall today and a slight risk on Friday. So definitely just be prepared for more rainfall, as there is really no relief in sight for y'all. So now that we know how much longer we're going to be dealing with this big flooding event up in Vermont, as we're going to be dealing with upwards of 2 inches of rainfall within the next 168 hours, let's go ahead and take a look at what kind of tropical storms and hurricanes we could be dealing with out here in the Atlantic and the Pacific. And it looks like out here in the Atlantic, we could be dealing with the tropical storm chance within the next 7 days, which is a 50% chance. As you can take a look at the wording here, you see that there is definitely going to be a chance for tropical storm development. And out here in the Pacific, there's a greater chance of it. And there's a 90% chance, as there's already Invest 94E. That's going to basically turn into a tropical storm as it heads out and through the Pacific and possibly affect Hawaii by next week. As we take a look at the sea surface temperatures, we can see that the sea surface temperatures are way above average for this time of year. And this is a result of an El Nino pattern. Basically, it's warmer sea surface temperatures with more wind shear out in the Atlantic and less wind shear out in the Pacific. That's why the Pacific is so active this time of year. And as we look at the wind shear out in the Atlantic, we can see that we got this little tropical storm chance. That's 50% chance. Looks like it's just going to turn out into the Atlantic and basically just going to form and just churn out into the east and not affect the United States due to the wind shear that's going to be taking place over here. But as we look at the Pacific, you can see that we're going to have a lot of wind shear out there. That's what the reds are. Blues are less wind shear, reds are more. Looks like it's going to run into a lot of wind shear as it heads towards Hawaii. Let's go and take a look at what we could expect as we head towards the middle and the end of July. We're looking at the 500 millibar height anomalies. Blues are basically the troughing patterns, reds represent the ridging patterns. Basically, blues are bad weather, reds are good weather. And it looks like we're going to remain in this little troughing pattern out east with a major ridging pattern out west, so we could be dealing with some cool and wet conditions for the eastern part of the country and dry and hot conditions for the western part of the country. And this is why I said that the tropical storm chance out in the Atlantic is basically not going to affect the United States any due to this troughing pattern that's going to be setting in. But it looks like a major ridging pattern is going to set up as we head into the end of July. And as we look at the simulated radar, we can see that not much precipitation is going to be happening out west, but looks like we're going to come into a little bit of a slip and slide pattern out in the eastern part of the country with a lot of severe weather occurring next couple days into possibly the weekend, and a lot more flooding for the northeastern part of the country as well. Y'all haven't seen enough flooding as it is. It looks like that pattern's going to persist. And as we look at the temperatures, we know we've been sort of below average out in the eastern part of the country and sort of above average down here by Texas. And it looks like this pattern is going to shift a little bit. As we're going to be dealing with some way above average temperatures out west and still below average temperatures out in the middle part of the country. And it looks like as we head towards the end of the month, it looks like we're going to come into a major warm-up for much of the country. And according to the Climate Prediction Center, it looks like much of the country is going to remain above average as far as temperatures go, except for over here from North Dakota down into western Michigan. And as far as the 8 to 14 day outlook goes, looks like much of the country is going to remain above average due to this major ridging pattern that's going to be setting in. As far as precipitation outlook goes, for 6 to 10 days, looks like the western part of the country is going to remain dry and hot, while the eastern part of the country is going to remain sort of cool and wet. As far as 8 to 14 day outlook goes, looks like much of the country is going to be below average as far as precip goes, except for from Illinois on up into the northeast where y'all are going to remain above average. So it looks like a pretty active weather pattern is going to be in store for the eastern part of the country with even more flooding for Vermont and New Hampshire. So please be aware of that. If you live within the slight risk zones for the next couple days, just please remain weather aware. If you live within the slight risk zone today, I think the worst of this road is going to be happening from around 6 o'clock through 9 o'clock. If you can get out safely, make sure you send me some nice storm pictures. I'd like to see them on my Facebook page or my Twitter page. I'll have links to those in the description below. If you live within the slight risk zones on hump day, looks like you could expect a major derecho event from right around 12 o'clock through right around 5 o'clock. As far as hurricanes go, looks like we do have some development out there, but it don't look like any of those tropical storm chances are going to affect the homeland any. It looks like we're going to come into a cool and wet pattern out east with a dry and hot pattern out west. So if you like the video, please hit that thumbs up button. Don't forget to subscribe down below. I appreciate everybody for watching. And until next time, never stop forecasting.